Hey guys, Tammy here, and in this video, I want to talk to you about what will your judge remember? When we're standing in front of the judge and the judge is later going to have to make decisions on certain things, we want them to be able to recall what we said. So, how can we make sure that happens? Let me just remind you real quick, if you like these videos, please hit like and also subscribe to the channel so you get notified when new videos are released. So the thing that judges, not just judges, but anybody, so there's a psychological principle involved here, and you can go out and research it if you want to, but people tend to recall the best what they hear first. So, in other words, the very first thing out of your mouth is going to be the thing that the judge probably recalls the best if they're like the vast majority of people. Now, this is interesting because many times when I'm working with clients and I start asking them, well, what are the issues going on in your case? Normally, what they start with is not necessarily the thing that the court would likely give the heaviest weight to. So, how do we determine what the court would give the heaviest weight to? Well, again, this goes back to issues of health, safety, and welfare, right? So, if we have red flag issues of alcoholism, drugs, if there's education issues, if somebody's not getting the kid to therapy, if there's big issues like that that are very heavily weighted in the court, then those are going to be the things that are our best points. But we often don't give voice to our best points first. We often give voice to our most emotional issues first. So when I start asking a client the types of things that are going on in their situation, a lot of times what I'll hear is things like, well, the other person doesn't cooperate, or the other person is always late for the visits. The other person puts the child in the middle, or the child is voicing that they don't want to go visit the other parent. And I'm not saying that those points aren't necessarily good points in your case. I'm just saying that you have to determine, especially if you're self-represented, because if you're not, I mean, then obviously an attorney is going to determine that for you. But if you're self-represented, then you've got to determine what are the most heavily weighted issues, or what is the most heavily weighted issue in your situation, and be able to start with that point in your presentation. Now, Thomas has talked about this in previous videos where he says, really, you don't want to have more than about 4 points when you're standing in front of the judge on a regular motion. If you're at trial and your entire case is at issue, that's going to be a little bit different can of worms. But he would always say that when you have a regular motion, so if we're in front of the court on a custody issue or a support issue or whatever that one-time thing is, really you need to have about 3 points, 4 at most, but 3 is preferable. Or less, 3 or less, I should say. It's always an option to have less, but most people don't. Most people have more. And so what you have to do is back up and kind of look at these and ask yourself, what is the thing that the court is going to find most important? And make that your first issue, because that is going to be the point that the judge remembers the best in all likelihood. I also think it's a good idea to restate that key point at the end, maybe in a more brief way, so that you're kind of keeping it fresh in the judge's memory at the very end of it. And particularly if your other couple of issues in the middle are kind of more of those issues like conflict with the other person, or things that are really just more annoying than a safety issue for the child, like the other parent showing up late and doing those kinds of things. So you really want to pound on the issue that's going to be your heavily weighted issue, because that's what's going to get you the most bang for your buck. You want to state that at the very beginning, fill in with your other key points, and then restate it at the end. And, when we talk about making these key points, we also talk about no more than 1 to 2 examples of each point. So let's say my second point is that the other parent is frequently late for pickups. Okay, let's not use words like always and never, because the court will automatically, their brain will kind of go, okay, well, I'm sure they're not always late every single time. And then you'd probably have to say, well, no, they're not always late. So then I've already hurt my credibility, right? So make sure you're choosing your words carefully. I even tell people to write this out a lot of times. Sit down, write it out, and make sure that you're getting your points in order, and that you're thinking through your key examples. So if we're going to say that they're frequently late, then maybe we want to give 2 examples and say, Your Honor, the most recent example was on this date at this time at this location. The other parent was 17 minutes late for the pickup. And the time before that was on this date, this time at this location. The other parent was 13 minutes late for the pickup, whatever it is. And so you have to make sure that you're doing your due diligence in other areas, that you're documenting things and that you're keeping track and that you're keeping specific detailed notes, so that when you do go to make these points for the court, you have all of the information that you need. Because when you're standing in front of the court, you have to keep in mind that your goal in that instance is not to be heard. Your judge is not there to hear your emotional perspective. Your judge is not there to validate your feelings. And I think many times, especially self-represented parties, fall into this trap where they want the court to agree, oh yeah, your ex is difficult. Oh yeah, you seem like a good parent. Courts don't usually do that kind of thing. And partly because your judge's job is to be impartial. Their job isn't to criticize or praise one parent or the other. I have seen judges say things like, you both seem like really good parents, where they will praise them simultaneously. But your judge's job is to be neutral. And so they're not there to take sides. So if you're putting forth points that are more emotional and are more about you being heard and you feeling validated, then you're not going to have success in your court case. And then you're going to wonder why. Why? Because you aren't presenting the points that are the most heavily weighted, important points for the court. Now, if you don't have a red flag issue like alcohol or drugs or education issues, if there's none of those types of what we call red flag issues, then really the next points would be things that affect the kids. So the person showing up late wouldn't necessarily be a factor that affects the kids. It's annoying to me, but it may not even faze the children at all. But if I have an 18-month-old who's having a meltdown in the car seat because we're having to wait, or because we're inside the car, or whatever the case may be, and by the time I hand this child over to the other parent, they're crying and completely out of control emotionally because they've had to sit and wait. Okay, then that waiting becomes a bigger issue for the court than if it's just an inconvenience to one of the parents. Okay, so this isn't always as straightforward as this issue is important, this issue isn't important. And it's not that, all of your issues are important to some extent, right? But we want to pick our 3 to 4 best, our 3 to 4 most heavily weighted, and the top of the line for the court is usually health, safety, and welfare issues. And then we get into things that impact the children and their emotional well-being. And so you have to kind of just dissect things from that perspective and figure out what is going to give you the result that you're trying to accomplish in court. And obviously, that result is best accomplished if the judge remembers the key point in your argument. So always start with that and try to briefly restate it at the end. Because of this issue, this is why I'm asking for this. So I hope that's helpful. If you'd like to learn more about my coaching services, please go to divorceuniversityonline.com. VIP dash coaching. There's a link on there where you can book a free strategy session with me. And I'd love to see how I might be able to help you more on this journey. Thanks so much.
We'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the horizon, turn us to thousands.